Hello, and welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, episode number 52. Today, we are going to be talking about perspective and how a shift in our own perspective can really be everything when it comes to how we view our life, how we view our challenges, our circumstances, our quote unquote problems. Anything in our life can all come down to perspective. And so we want to jump into that. We want to talk about why that is. And we also want to talk about what do we do about it when we know that our perspective might be keeping us back from being able to move forward at work, at home, in a dream we might have that's unrealized, whatever that might be. What is the perspective that we might need to reevaluate? So I want to start with a story. So years ago, about 13 years ago, not long after I moved from California and Sacramento area to Ashland, Oregon, I worked for an organization that was a manufacturing type plant. And it was one of those that was really struggling with morale, with engagement, with productivity. It was a company that was based out of New York, but they had the plant that I worked at in Oregon, and it got no love. And I'm sure many of you know that, where you've got a satellite office that perhaps you're doing HR or whatever role you're in, and that home office might be so far away that ultimately they're not connected at all. And when you try to bring them into being connected about some of the challenges and issues that might be facing within the organization, as I did when I came in as their one and only HR person for over, I think, 250 employees, they didn't want to hear it. Like they didn't have that level of engagement. And so it was a really challenging environment to be in. And I remember at the time I was, 10 years, almost 10 years into my HR career at that point, and I really was wanting to, make an impact and make a name for myself and do all these things that would help me grow and evolve in my career. And I remember just being hit with day after day after day, negative or really not welcoming responses to me trying to want to build engagement within the organization and try to bring people in and have like these really great conversations that can help us get to where hopefully these employees would want to go in terms of feeling like they add value to the organization. But where I was at that time, they didn't want it, and I certainly didn't have the skills at that time, the mindset and the ability to be able to tune out what is being received in and really be able to still ground into how I want to show up regardless of the circumstances. And that's really what I can look back on now and look back at that me at that time, where even though I had the best of intentions going in, I let it get to me day after day after day, receiving a cold or a negative response from the employees in the organization because they just did not really feel as though they were getting the treatment or the recognition that they really wanted from that at that corporate level. So from me as an HR perspective, like my hands could not have been more tied in that situation. And so that's really where it came down to, that ultimately, as much as I felt like I wanted to do my best, I wasn't able to get out of my own way in terms of letting that negativity and letting that get at me. So ultimately I ended up leaving after about a year in the organization. And years later, so this was about 2, 3 years ago, I was in an airport here locally. So they call it an international airport here in Medford, Oregon, but it's not. It's not all that international. But anyway, I was at the airport, and a gentleman that I worked with at that organization that I worked at 12, 13 years ago at the manufacturing plant, we ran into each other and we were talking a little bit, and it was really great to see him. And he had said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I want to thank you for trying. I know how much you are trying to bring more positivity into a really dark situation, and it really mattered." And I, at that time, I was just floored to hear that because I did not realize anyone saw what I was putting out there, which is why, again, it started building up within myself that I was failing, I didn't know how to shift the situation. But ultimately, what I realized all these years later, it was out of my control. There was nothing I could do with the ultimate reality of what these individuals were facing at that time. And the more light I brought into the situation, the better it was ultimately, even though at the time I didn't see that. And to hear that from that former employee, for them to be able to say, hey, I really saw that and thank you for that, was something that I could not have anticipated how much it meant to me. And I couldn't also have realized all these years later that I had it within me all along, right? The skills were within me to be able to not take what was outside of my control personally. But because I didn't really have those skills, the more I was taking it personally, the harder it was to continue to show up in a way that had authenticity and intention and all the things that I would really want to be able to give. It got harder and harder and harder to be able to do that, which ultimately, and here's the reality, unfortunately, when we struggle with really trying to force feed, a level of energy, a level of positivity, a level of engagement, whatever that looks like, and we're forcing it onto others, and not forcing it onto others, but what I mean is forcing it sometimes from a place that it doesn't necessarily feel like it's coming out the easiest and most authentic, but we deep down know it's what's needed for us to be able to really be able to kind of show others what's possible. And that's one thing that I've come to believe about the HR profession over the years and other service positions as well, right? Like, I really believe that ultimately we can do our best work, quote unquote, when we can push past whatever's holding us back mindset wise, whatever negativity, whatever doubts, whatever worries, whatever anxieties, whatever it is that's kind of keeping us from not being able to just show and express and be a source of light. Then I believe that that's where this type of work that we're going to talk about today, and I call it work, but it's not. This is really what we can do within ourselves that can truly be able to make a difference in how we can continuously show up for others in a way that's going to help bring out the best in them. So why don't we talk about a quote? So there is a quote from Wayne Dyer that is amazing. I have a book that, oh shoot, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it talks about really a way of living in terms of how we think and the thoughts that we think that become patterns and problematic, right? Because the programming of our thinking, and we'll get to that when I get into a couple of statistics, but first let me get into his quote. So Wayne Dyer said that when you change the way that you look at things, the things you look at change. And this is really, I think, kind of the essence to the story that I told at the beginning. Because at that time, at my level of maturity and emotional intelligence, I didn't have a clue that it really all came down to how I was choosing to look at things, how I was choosing to think about things, how I was choosing to believe that things were without truly checking in with whether or not the beliefs that I have were true, or if there have been thoughts that I've been carrying along with me that I've chosen to believe are true. And so with that quote, it's just amazing to be able to say, hey, you know what, this doesn't need to be your reality. You get to choose. And the power of perspective is first the self-awareness. The self-awareness of, oh wow, I do get to choose at any time. And then to be able to recognize that our emotional the emotional energies that we carry around within us. I can speak today, I swear. I think I need a sip of water. Let me take a quick sip. Oh my gosh, it is 7 a.m. here on the West Coast on a Sunday, and that's when I tend to go live, and I love going live. But some mornings, especially like last night, I got to go to a show and see the Vagina Monologues. I've never seen it before, and it was so much fun. So, anyway, I digress. So, when we're talking about like what it really is that causes us to think the way that we do on repeat, right? Believe the things that we do on repeat. These are the things that I think when it comes to perspective is first and foremost gaining the self-awareness within ourselves to recognize that we do have these patterns of thinking and then getting to the point where we start questioning and evaluating and then asking ourselves the real important question is this a belief that I want to continue believing based on the evidence I now have, right? And so that type of work, when we talk about coaching and we talk about the ability to shift our mindset, that is the work that I highly recommend to any of the people that I work with and to everyone that I care about, which includes you. That is the type of work that I truly believe should be done anytime we find ourselves in a situation where we become unexpectedly emotionally triggered. And so that's, a key element to emotional intelligence, I think, is really starting to recognize, hey, that was something that triggered me. We got through it, but now I want to spend a moment really analyzing what was it that caused me to engage in that way, or what was it that caused me to react in that way. So a lot to think about there, a lot to unpack there. And so let's kind of break this out a little bit and talk about how do we gain perspective? Where do we start? So again, I said we start with self-awareness. And I want to really talk about for a moment what exactly is self-awareness. And again, when I had said that the ability to recognize when we've become triggered, I think that is a key and essential element of self-awareness. And then the other part of self-awareness that I think is essential is really recognizing how our internal energy is impacting everything around us, whether or not we intend for it to or not. Have you ever walked into a room and you immediately could tell as soon as you walked into that room, let's say you're running a little late for a meeting, for example, and you walk into that meeting and you can tell immediately something's off energetically, right? And the flip. So imagine you're walking into that meeting, it's 10 minutes late, you walk in, you hear laughing and fun and playfulness. That's another indicator, right? You can tell immediately the level of energy within that room. So the self-awareness, I think, really allows us the opportunity to gain that perspective at any moment, anytime we're engaging in a dynamic with other individuals or whether or not other individuals are engaging with us. It's the ability to slow ourselves down for just a moment and recognize that something is either entering into our our area or we're entering into an area that energetically is to be noted. And when we can make that note of that energetic pulse or temperature or whatever we want to call it, there's an ability in that moment, and it's something that for me has taken some practice over time to be able to recognize, okay, I recognize that this is something that is a little bit off from what I would have expected or hoped it might be. Now what? Right? And recognize immediately. And here's what so many of us do. Right? Here's what I absolutely know that I've done many times, and I know that many of you out there have done as well, is go into that room that was silent, cold, uncomfortable, awkward, and because I was late, right, I'm going to immediately jump into a story. There's going to be some story that's going to pop into my head around how upset this person is or how frustrated this person might be with me, right, that I've inconvenienced them. So I'm going to immediately go to self-judgment. I'm going to immediately go to self-criticism and self-blame. And that's absolutely normal. And that's the trick, right? That's the absolute money money move, right, is to recognize that our brains are going to automatically go into a story about something that's going to cause us to become self-critical of ourselves. How can we, one, become aware of it and recognize it and say, ooh, I'm now starting to spin a little bit and I need to kind of get myself back into balance, basically, so that I don't allow the story to start impacting how I am showing up, right? Because you know just as well as I know that when we start spinning out on some story or some narrative that we think that we've done something wrong or we think that something is wrong, we're now not fully present. We're now missing a lot of opportunity to be able to be truly and fully in the moment because now we're here. Our brain and our ego really has taken us for this ride. And so the self-awareness that we must start building is really that ability to say, oh, okay, wait a minute. This is something that's causing me to start to spin a little bit. It's starting to cause some anxiety to build up within me, some worry to build up within me. How can I be able to kind of take a pause within myself, right, to gain that greater perspective of the bigger picture and not let myself start to go into the spin, and instead be able to recalibrate ourselves and be able to reestablish, wait, what is it that I'm really wanting to do here? What is it? How is it I'm wanting to be here? And those are very quick questions that we can ask ourselves and become curious in that moment and be able to then address that in that moment. But sometimes we're just not able to. So let's say there's a third scenario, right? You walk into that meeting room, your boss is in there going, why were you late? Give us an excuse right now why you would be late to this important meeting, right? You can tell without a doubt, right? There is anger, frustration, and you can tell without a doubt it is directed towards you, right? There's no doubt about it. Now, what do? Right? And I think for many of us, that's when we go in immediately to fight, flight, or freeze. Are we going to get defensive? Are we going to just freeze up and say, I'm so sorry, and just, cower down and really feel defeated and just shut down? Or are we going to try to bolt in some way and make excuses and say, oh, it's this person, it's that person, and play a victim, right? And try to find every reason why it wasn't me. Don't look at me. And that's, one of the most fascinating things I've found about fight, flight, or freeze, or even fawn, which you've never heard of, or have you heard of? Fawn is really the fourth F, where instead of fighting, freezing, flighting, we fawn. Oh, boss, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everybody. Right? We might just really placate to them. We might really try to go all in on our apology and our sorry, but really it's not authentic. Because ultimately, let's say we were late those 10 minutes because we were dealing with a crisis. An employee was suicidal, and we were in a room having a crisis conversation with an individual, completely justified without a doubt, right? But if we're turning it around and fawning back on others because they're accusing or assuming that our actions might have been intentional, ooh boy, that is a really, really tricky one too. So, all right, let's go back to the scenario. We've walked in and it's very clear they are frustrated with you. What do? Right? And so that is really, I think, when it comes to the skills that we teach in Thrive and Shine HR, and I teach as a coach, that's really is the process of being able to first recognize it's happening. Again, the self-awareness for me is what's taken the longest, and it's the hardest to keep up with, because if I don't practice it, it's kind of like, any sport or any type of thing that you don't do on a regular basis. Like, for years I was terrified of public speaking. And then I started doing it for a job. And I noticed that over time it got a little bit more and more comfortable, right? You just start, it's like you're riding a bike. So I think the same goes for when you are doing this type of work and you have situations and circumstances that hit you in a very triggering way. If you're not someone who actively meditates, practice mindfulness, or like what I really advocate for is thought work, where you go back again after you've had a triggering event and you really think about and you really do like a download or a dive into what was I thinking, what was coming up for me at that time that caused me to react in the way that I did, or that caused me to really turn off the way that I did. And that's the some of the keyest and most keyest, is that a word? That is some of the most important work that you'll ever do when it comes to truly getting to know who you are. Because it's really that under the surface, that peeling back of the onion that we must do, y'all, that we must do, that's really going to get to the root of what it is that's coming up for us that cause us to believe that we're not enough, or that we can't do this, or that people don't like us and that there's nothing that we can do about it, right? These beliefs on repeat end up becoming so damn programmed within us. Like there was a quote that, okay, let me take another step here. Thirsty this morning. So, beliefs that we believe in, or beliefs that we have, are thoughts that we have thought over and over again, and they then become belief. But are they true? Right? And that's one of the biggest questions that I think we can ever ask for ourselves in anything that we believe, right? How accurately can we prove the validity, the truth of many of the things that we believe, especially about ourselves, right? Especially about ourselves. So here it is, limiting beliefs. So beliefs that limit ourselves in some way are called limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs, they develop in us before the age of 7 and unconsciously guide 95% of our daily decisions. So let me say that again. So beliefs that we have about ourselves that are limiting in some way, that keep us down, that hold us back, that convince us that we're not good enough, they are formed before we're 7. And then they guide our daily decisions 95% of the time. And so what I have truly found more than anything else in terms of the coaching work that I've done for myself, and then I've also been able to pass along to others, is those beliefs that we have been carrying for so long, they are optional. And I'm going to say that one more time because I know that that's a really, really tough one for many of us. Our limiting beliefs are optional. And to be able to really parse out and recognize that they are optional is a game changer. So, all right, I want you to kind of think about that for just a moment. And I know without a doubt that there is somebody in your life, whether or not they are in HR, whether or not they are a woman in HR, anybody out there who has ever struggled with limiting beliefs about themselves and the ability to rise above and gain a better perspective in the world around us, I want you to consider sending them this episode and really sharing with them how much you care about their ability to be able to break through from their own limiting beliefs. So with that, I'm going to take just a quick break from our sponsor, Thrive 360, and we're going to be back in just a moment. And I can get there. No, it's not letting me. It's doing that thing again. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right, we're going to instead talk about our sponsor, Thrive 360. I can't get the audio version to work here. But that figures, that's how these things go. Hopefully we're going to be able to cut that out in the editing room. All right, Thrive 360 is a tech-driven platform, and it delivers custom wellness programs using expert created content from leading doctors and therapists. It's one of those platforms that I think is exactly what so many of us employers out there really truly need. Something that can be customized based on the individual preferences and needs. And they fill an assessment out when you first come on board. And then ultimately the programming that they have that they get assigned, like a journey, I think, or something like that. They get assigned a path of being able to go along. So if anxiety is something that someone's really struggling with, or if it's burnout and overwhelm, it's going to deliver a path to them with leading doctors, leading therapists to really help with nutrition, to help with mindset, to help with energy, to help with all the things that are really going to help them specifically in their own life. And it's a platform that I think is massively needed in our organizations, because again, to be able to really tap into that customization component is not anything that you see with employee assistance programs and many of the other wellness programs out there that tend to be off the shelf, one size fits all. And Thrive 360 goes way beyond that, and they deliver a product that really is customized to deliver exactly what your employees need. All right, back to our program. So, all right, I want to talk about a couple of other statistics when it comes to perspective and our mindset. So, 80%, 80% of our success truly does come down to mindset. There was a study by a Stanford psychologist, Carol Dweck, and if you know Carol Dweck, she is the author of Mindset, and it is an amazing book. But she found that having a growth mindset, and really all a growth mindset really means is being able to believe that your abilities and your circumstances can improve with effort. That's all it means, right? It's that continuous belief that things can get better through effort. And it's staggering how much many times people really struggle with a growth mindset. When you really talk with, for those of us in HR, how many employees and leaders do we talk to on a regular basis? When you really start to get to know them, you can hear their limiting mindset. You can hear the scarcity just flowing through. And I think that having a more of a growth mindset is being able to shift a lot of those scarcity beliefs, again getting back to our beliefs, and being able to recognize that we do have agency, that we do have the ability to change. It's just a matter of effort. So another statistic says that people who really actively work on positive mindset, growth mindset, the active intention around mindset, basically, they tend to live 7.5 years longer than people who don't actively work on their mindset. And this was studies done through both Harvard and through Yale. So it's big information that continues to come out as there's more and more studies from the neuropsychology and neuroplasticity, and just everything that we are learning about our brains and understanding about our brains, to be able to recognize how much power, how much agency we have over ourselves. And it has to start within us in order for us to ever be able to transmit that to others, right? I think you and I both well can think of many a time where someone has come up to us or attempted in some way to give us advice. And it may be well-meaning in a lot of ways, but you can tell just by their energy and by their conviction then I don't know that they really believe it for themselves or they really believe it in general. And so maybe they felt this need to want to transmit that onto someone else. A lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of coaches I've seen where they try to really commit to what it is they're trying to promote or teach, and ultimately you can just feel that it's not in them, that it's not true for them, and it just doesn't feel very authentic. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel very genuine. So being able to kind of recognize that within ourselves, within others, I think is such a great start when it comes to awareness. And then it's about shifting and taking that pause, right? Again, awareness and then pause, and then being able to say, hey, what do I want to do about this? There's actually, let me find my thing here. There's actually 4 R's that have come up for me when it comes to how can we respond when we become aware of a limiting belief that's keeping us back and that's holding us from being able to move forward. I don't know why I had to say that 2 times. So the first R is recognize. Again, self-awareness. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, I see. In the situation, let's go back to that scenario number 3, right? We walk into the room, we immediately know people are really unhappy, they're upset, they're frustrated, they're looking at us. Why were you late? Why would you make us wait in this way? Whatever it is, right? Number 1, recognize that's what's happening, right? They don't need to know the story of whatever it was that brought me into that room, whatever reason, whatever I might be carrying. They don't have any of that information, right? And ultimately, what I'm walking into is it's the reality. It's the reality of it. And so recognizing that that's happening and then recognizing how I might start, because a lot of times, especially when it's a pretty intense situation, it can be very, very quick in how often our emotions start taking over. And so that quick moment can be really hard to catch. It can be almost impossible to be able to catch, right? You're like, how can I become self-awareness? How can I become self-aware? When next thing I know, I'm like completely freaking out. I'm having a panic attack. I'm scared. I was supposed to present. Now I can't even think straight, right? And this is so normal, especially under intense circumstances. And so the recognizing piece is the practicing of being able to understand that's completely normal that I'm freaking out right now. It's completely normal that I am not thinking clearly and I'm feeling triggered right now. It's completely understandable. But that's where we get ourselves all tripped up, y'all. Because what ends up happening so often is we end up judging that. I shouldn't be so worked up. Of course, they have every reason to be frustrated, and it shouldn't be making me nervous or stressed out or scared. And instead, I should just be jumping into my presentation and ignore that, right? And so that's where it ends up almost like a snowball. And next thing you know, we're stumbling all over ourselves. We're all over the place because that initial thought of them being very unhappy with us and maybe we deserved it is now just completely taken over in terms of how we're able to show up for the rest of the meeting and conversation, because we've now made some serious judgments about ourselves in that moment. Versus that recognition of, hey, this is happening, right? And then the second one, after I take a quick drink from my Brave mug, the second one is reframe. So we recognize that this is what's happening. Reframing is that you have the option to be able to catch yourself regardless of whether or not you're feeling what you're feeling. Again, going back to all of that is completely normal and very understandable that we would be having an emotional reaction based on the circumstances. Completely. The reframing piece is really that pause point. That's the power move, right? The pause point power move is really being able to ask ourselves, What do I want to do with this in this moment? Right? So if it were me in this moment, what would I do or what could be done in this moment to be able to reframe this? And so what I have been able to recognize is that being able to say in that moment, how do I want to reframe this? How do I choose to reframe this so that I can still be very intentional with what I'm here to do and why I'm here to do it. And that reframing is a recentering of ourselves that we can choose to do. Take a quick moment and be able to maybe to even take a sip of water and say, I'm so sorry that I'm late. Show show that understanding of, the circumstances, right? If there's something to own it. Just own it freely, right? And I think that when we can do that, when we can speak to it and speak to the accountability of whether or not I was late or I forgot this report or this presentation that I need to deliver, and now I'm completely frantic because I was not prepared. Right. And so now what do I do? And being able to reframe ourselves sometimes is, can I take just a quick pause? I'm gonna take a quick sip of my coffee. And that moment right there gives ourselves a chance that yes, we're feeling energetically off, right? Based on what's now shifted in the circumstances that we're within. However, the what do I want to do with it? Where do I want to go from here? Is the ability to still have whatever energy, whatever emotion might still be there for you, but being able to kind of recognize that it is an energy ultimately, and we get to choose where we really take that energy. So reframing is being able to kind of move away from whatever shame, doubt, worry, anxiety, whatever has come up for us initially in that stressful moment, and being able to say, okay, I'm feeling all these feels. Can I be able to take those feels and reframe it intentionally so that I can really be able to do what needs to be done? 9 times out of 10, I've really come to believe that the answer is yes. And it just takes a moment for me to be able to collect myself, to be able to recenter myself, and then to be able to reframe myself. So the third R that comes up when it comes to being able to shift our mindset and gain a better perspective or perspective, yeah, is resilience. So resilience is the ability to be able to recognize that when we do get triggered, it's not a it's it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or that I'm a problem or that I'm bad, right? So often the energy that comes with intense emotions takes us to a very dark place. It takes us to a really negative place. And again, that's all normal. That is the negativity bias that every one of us deals with anytime we have a trigger that is unexpected and unpleasant in some way, right? So being able to say, okay, this is completely normal, again, that I'm going to be triggered based on the circumstances. And having the resilience is over time being able to more quickly become aware, to recognize, right? To more quickly be able to reframe, to check ourselves, to become curious around how we actually do want to be showing up in the circumstances. And then being able to have a renewed purpose, which is the fourth R. So the renewed purpose is really being able to say at any time, regardless of my emotional triggers, I can renew my purpose and know that it is part of the wave of being human, that I'm going to have triggers and I'm going to have reactivity to things. But how can I be able to recognize where my purpose really is? Where is my intention? And get right back on track. And so the tools that come with being able to gain the resilience and be able to truly be able to shift in that space takes time, right? I've been working on this for a good 3 solid years now. Before that, it was very hit and miss in terms of how mindful I was around my own reactions, my own behavior, and more importantly, the limiting beliefs that were underneath it all. And so recognizing that it has been something that prior to my 48 years of my life before I started to really put these tools into practice was one certain way in terms of how I reacted and responded and overreacted or under responded, right? So all of those things were part of my reality all my life. And so reprogramming that is taking time. And after 3 years, I can't say that I'm ever going to be to a place of perfect when it comes to how I respond to when I'm triggered. I'll never be able to do that. But what I will be able to do is know from deep down the bottom of my heart that I'm willing to do the work, to continue to try, to grow each time it doesn't go the way that I would have hoped or wanted or desired, because I now understand that every time that happens, every time I have a circumstance that I walk away from and go, oh, I wish I hadn't gotten frustrated, or I wish I hadn't, said that, or, whatever it might be, I'm able to go back and I'm able to reflect and say, okay, wait, what was it that then caused me to react and engage in a way that I didn't really enjoy? And then framing and recognizing how I could have reframed, I think is really one of the most powerful things that I could ever do, is be able to say, okay, now what? Next time, right? I can't do anything about yesterday, but revisiting it, and why for so many of us it's super uncomfortable. It's not fun, right? I mean, how fun is it to go back to yesterday when you snapped at the kids and be able to then check in with yourself around why it felt necessary at that time to engage energetically in that negative way, right? In a way that didn't help the situation, that didn't serve the situation. And asking myself if that's how I would want to show up next time, right? And these are not easy and fun questions to ask, but being willing to ask them and then being willing to go inward and recognize where are the beliefs, where are the things that really caused me to feel like I was backed in a corner, that I then engaged from that place of being triggered. So having that level of awareness and gaining that level of perspective, that level of emotional maturity, is something that you are going to be so thankful for beyond belief, to recognize that these are the skills that really make a massive difference in how we can continue to show up as better and better and better versions of ourselves. Okay, where am I? Making sure I got everything. Okay. Oh, so now that we've kind of gone through some of the tools, I want to talk a little bit about another story that I have that I think is really going to be helpful when it comes to how quickly sometimes we can shift our perspective when it just is opened up to us, and we're willing to be open enough to be able to see another perspective. And yeah, once I tell the story, then let's talk about what the key learnings can be. So I work as part of a unionized environment, and part of that unionized environment, as anybody who works in a unionized environment, is that gap of communication that you have between employees, leadership, union members. And so having sometimes the disconnects that you have within an organization that is unionized can be really tough, especially for someone who really prides myself in being a good communicator and making sure people feel heard, making sure that it's understood and reciprocated on the company side. And coming into an organization that had this type of environment was really a mind blow for me that I came into this and saying, oh no, we can't talk to them about this or them about that, and having to filter myself based on the level of communication that I know could be so valuable in the circumstances that we have. And we had a while back, we had an individual who was promoted from being a part of our union to then being a part of our leadership team. And the awareness that one gains when they shift roles from being a peer with somebody to now being someone who leads, they coach, and they manage, it's overnight. It's almost an overnight wow. I really had never realized how quickly, and this is coming from someone who, was part of it at this level and now is part of it at this more expanded level, and really being able to see it for a whole new thing that they never realized was possible. And it was really an amazing conversation that I was able to have with this individual as they were coming into this greater perspective and recognizing how quickly that can actually come to us when when we are willing to ask the questions, when we're willing to challenge some of the beliefs that we have around the dichotomies that come in organizations and in our society. This individual and I had one of the best conversations ever in talking about how easily and how quickly we get caught up in our organizations and in our groups and in even our church groups and in our society and everywhere, just about everywhere you go. Human beings get caught up in dichotomies. They get caught up in we and them, the us and them. They get caught up in me, you, black, white, wrong, right. We get caught up in so much of that. And that is so ingrained and programmed within us to have that, to see if I'm right, you must be wrong, right? If this is good, then that must be bad. And those dichotomies, those questions that we continue to not really fully ask ourselves and be able to be willing to say, wait, what is that really? What is that causes us to see them as other, right? And not as truly a greater part of connected, and that we are all connected. And, so it's really, I think, has been a powerful thing that I've been playing with even more and more and more, especially in the last several months. I have been able to really see from a perspective that has been much more expansive based on my willingness, especially from a political standpoint, based on my willingness to step outside the dichotomy and really be able to lean in more. And, I think that has helped me grow in the last few months in a way that I wasn't anticipating, and in a way that I'm really excited because, like I said earlier, we're never done. From the ability to be able to pull ourselves out of the programming that many of us have been working with for decades and decades and decades, being able to see things differently and being open to new possibilities and new perspectives and new opinions is a stretch. So I think that what I want to do as we wrap up today's episode, first, real quick, again, I want to do a huge shout out to our sponsor today, Thrive 360, Christy Lamka, who's Chief Operating Officer of Thrive 360. She and I have been friends for a few years now. We had the pleasure back in 2023 to do a 5-part series all about mental health. It was called Shattering the Stigma. And so she and I have kept in touch over the years, and I am so excited to have her as a guest and being and to interview her for Thrive and Shine HR in a coming episode. So it's going to be, I think, episode 55 is going to be Christy and I's interview, and I can't wait for that. But she is so passionate, and the organization is so passionate around truly finding ways to meet people where they are, right? To truly find a platform that can eliminate a lot of the tape, eliminate a lot of the things that keep people from feeling comfortable and safe, which are two of the biggest reasons that people don't get the mental and emotional support that we all need. And so to feel comfortable and safe, that's what Christy and Thrive 360 do. So if you're interested in Thrive 360, please reach out to me. I have a discount code that I'd love to share with you and would love to get you set up with a demo. All right, so with that, let's talk about some of the things that are coming up. So I am excited. I've got several things. If you are in the Southern Oregon area, which I know is just limiting very much, but the power of perspective, what we just talked about today, I am going to be doing a much deeper dive, and it's going to be live and in person on April 29th at the Ashland Food Co-op in Ashland. If you are around, go on the Ashland Food Co-op's website. I'll put a link in the show notes for this episode. Would love for you to sign up and come. Another thing that I've got going on is I am launching a 6-week program called Alive to Thrive in 25. So if you are a professional, HR professional, any professional who really wants to get out of your own way when it comes to limiting beliefs, I would love to connect with you, give you a free quick coaching session, and find out whether or not this coaching program could be right for you. So click on the link in the show notes to be able to learn more and express your interest. All right, so with that, we are wrapping up on this episode of Thrive and Shine HR. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, if the power of your perspective and the power of the perspective of those you love and care about really is important for you, I would love for you to like this episode, share it with those you care about, and then make sure that you are subscribed to Thrive and Shine HR, because then you can get notified as I drop future episodes. And next episode, episode 53, is going to be an interview with Janita Everett. Janita is my very, very first paid coaching client, and she is somebody that I know that you're going to be inspired by. She has gone through a whole lot over the last year, got laid off, really struggled to find her way, and is now finding herself in a way that she never knew was possible. So I can't wait for that episode. Join us next week on April 6th, I think it is, on Sunday live, and the episode will drop as a podcast and video cast very quickly after that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and don't forget, everybody, every single day is a new day to thrive and shine in HR. Take care, everybody. We will see you next time.